stated that you have some insights as to the events in the UK will happen soon. Do you mind if you could share this exclusively with us? I mean, whatever you are able to reveal at this point in time.
I will certainly do so. I'm happy to do so. But just to conclude on that point about brownwashing, can you imagine at this moment in time, there are Hindus, Hindu children scattered all over the globe, in the United Kingdom, in London, in America, in all the universities there. They are actually being targeted for brownwashing right now. They are being groomed so that they too can be turned against their own ancestors, their own ancestral civilization. And it's being done so effectively. But what we're hoping is that, if I can use Saint Augustine as a source, Saint Augustine once said, he said, "The truth doesn't need to be defended. The truth is a lion. It just needs to be released." And what we're hoping to do is that when the truth of how brownwashing is actually implemented and how it's being deliberately leveraged and weaponized against our own children in Bharat, but also outside of Bharat, then our own children will start to think, well, hang on a moment.
Right.
Do I really want to become what Macaulay had designed and defined for me? Is that what my purpose is? And anybody who studies Macaulay's writings, the Christianists' writings, they will see how expert they were at weaponizing indigenous people to turn against their own tradition, their own family, and their own civilization. And I think we will then see less brownwashing, becoming less effective. So turning to the point that you have just raised about this
Yes.
new event, fortunately, we've now got a very active network, which is becoming a little bit more alert at trying to monitor the threats that are almost spawning on a daily basis against us. And I have been, it's been brought to my attention by one of my very dear good friends that an event is being held, and it's being hosted by Dr. Meena Dhanda. Dr. Meena Dhanda is a professor at Wolverhampton University, and she was the principal architect of that completely unfounded allegation that British Hindus were discriminating against each other on the basis of caste. And she was one of the key drivers. And if I wanted an example of somebody who was brownwashed, I would say that she has been brownwashed to such a degree that I have nothing but sympathy for her. But she is the person who was also leading the panel discussion, or the panel debate as it was publicized, on caste at the Dismantling Global Hindutva conference. Okay, and this word caste is important to recognize. So I don't know if your viewers have seen the video of what was said, but it was her panel where they said things which were so horrific and hateful, where they said things like that people with a surname of Sharma, Trivedi, that these people are brought up to be violent, that, you know, these are violent people by nature and by nurture. It's such a ridiculous statement to make, but she was the one who was hosting and moderating that particular session. Destroyers. Anybody who reads his life story will come across the most horrific profile. His philandering, his betrayal of his wife, his personal life was such a complete mess. But he was the one who advocated that in order to save Bharat and in order to restore a better civilizational ethos, the solution that Hitler found for his Jewish problem is the solution that should be implemented in Bharat against the Brahmins. Okay, so he was advocating the a wholesale Holocaust against the Brahmin community.
Right.
His writings were vicious. Anybody who would read it would understand that this was not the work of a political strategist, of somebody who has a vision which is in the interests of humanity. This was the ramblings of a person who qualified for all of the psychiatric profiles which define psychoses, whether it's a psychopath or a sociopath. As a person, he qualifies for an assessment on that basis. But here's the second thing. The word caste is being used. So supposedly, the conversation is again focusing around caste. And caste is something that the brown-washed pseudo-intellectual academics, these Indologists, that they love to talk about. You know, it's one of those concepts that has been created. Yes. If you want to undermine a Hindu, you throw in what I've called the caste bomb. It doesn't matter what the subject is, you toss in the caste bomb at every opportunity against Hindus to weaken them and to put them on the back foot. And so supposedly, the European Union received an application for funding to do with caste. And the funding is to try and push forward the boundaries of understanding so that we can eliminate and eradicate this horrific Hindu practice of caste. And it's that colonialist trope. There's no substance behind it. We've dismantled it completely. We've established, without having the proposition refuted, that caste, the discrimination that caste caused, the horrors that it inflicted upon our society and community, was purely a white European Christian creation. This is set in stone. Nobody has been able to challenge this, and the evidence is irrefutable. But what happens is that people of Dr. Meena Danda's profile, i.e. those who have been already colonized in terms of Macaulay's definition of colonizing Hindus, they still carry this mission that their masters put into them with a loyalty which is disappointing. They have refused to interrogate the very basis upon which they apply for these funds. The European Union, if you think about what the European Union is, it's a cabal of white Christian nations. Those nations that went out into the world and wreaked havoc on 2/3 of humanity, when they could no longer keep hold of their slave colonies, remember the colonies were colonies of slaves. When they could no longer keep hold of them, they all came home and created Fortress Europe, which is a white Christian cartel. It's a group of nations who have stolen from the rest of the world, brought their ill-gotten gains back to Europe, and they've then created economic walls around them to protect their ill-gotten gains. And so it's in their interests that the wider world should not know about what they have done. And what better way than to continuously fund brown people to keep attacking brown people? You know, we all have only a limited amount of bandwidth, don't we? And if you can fill that bandwidth with horror stories and atrocity literature about what these terrible non-white, non-Christian people are doing, then nobody has bandwidth left to be able to say, well, hold on a minute. You have no moral authority to be able to make these judgments. That the institutions of justice that you establish, their foundations lie on the blood and the suffering of masses of brown people. So you don't have the right to do this. And so, you know, this is why the European machine will continuously keep funding brown people to harm brown people. But I'm reassured that the new generation is now beginning to say, we don't buy this. You know, the people who went to the Americas and entered into 500 treaties with the indigenous non-white people, and then breached and broke every single one of those treaties, killed 100 million native indigenous Americans. These are not people who qualify for having the right to occupy the moral high ground. And we are now beginning to see this. So it's a question of time before more and more people see this. So this conference that's being held in Wolverhampton University is actually nothing other than an extension of that same tired old, let's spread colonialist tropes. And you know, frankly speaking, I think all of us are becoming a little bit tired of it. And we're all beginning to dismantle it quite effectively now. So that's what this conference is. It's about Periyar, supposedly his position and his contribution to the political thought on caste. But there are a couple of points to note that we've identified already. Mm-hmm. Academics are required to educate their students on two dimensions. One is on providing them with historical data and facts, but two is on how to think about that data and facts. And in order to fulfill that, you have to be able to present both sides of any issue. The moment you only present one side of the issue, it's no longer academic, it's propaganda. And propaganda should not be funded by the public purse. And this conference is continuing in exactly the same way as the conference at Pennsylvania State, that what I called the residential school of the 21st century. This is continuing exactly the same policy. It's presenting one side, and its intention is to instill into their students a false, biased, hate-imbued perspective on history. And this is our objection. This is going to be our objection. Fine, if you want to talk about Periyar, talk about Periyar, but you mustn't confine it to only one side of a political perspective, or display only one aspect of the ideology which matches your own personal ideology. And this is not what professors and lecturers are supposed to do, and this is not what the public purse is supposed to be funding. So this is the event that's occurring. It's, as I said, Wolverhampton University, and it's on the last 2 days of October.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.